Welcome to Quick Classroom Mysteries. You must be the new junior detectives. Let us see how well you can put your newfound skills to the test. You'll be working closely with our best detectives, Inspector Felix and Detective Atla. Because you are new detectives, we'll need your help in the future. Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of future cases. Now to the case. Detective Jones threw the case folder down on his kitchen table, causing Inspector Felix to startle. Inspector Felix had come to Sydney, Australia, to visit his long-time friend and colleague, Detective Jones. "I know they are lying to me," Detective Jones started. "I just need to prove it." Detective Jones marched to the fridge and retrieved a cold drink. "Do you want me to look over the case for you, or you can talk me through it?" Inspector Felix offered. "Okay," Detective Jones said as he sat down and opened the case file. "We have a two-vehicle collision. In the first vehicle, let's call it Car A, we have two young males, aged 24 and 27, heading north along a back road. Car B only has one occupant, an 81-year-old woman, and she was travelling south on the same road. She claims they swerved onto her side of the road. She swerved onto the wrong side of the road to avoid hitting them, but they swerved back at the last minute. They claim she suddenly crossed into their path and there was nothing they could do to avoid hitting her." "Which lane did the collision occur?" Inspector Felix asked, peeking over Detective Jones's shoulder. "In the lane heading north, which is more consistent with the story of the two young men." "But something doesn't add up. I just know they're lying," Detective Jones said in a disheartened manner. "Any dashcam footage or witnesses?" Inspector Felix asked. "No, sadly," Detective Jones responded with a sigh. "Tell me your gut feeling of why each person could be the one who caused the accident," Inspector Felix encouraged Detective Jones. "All right," Detective Jones began. "Let's start with the elderly lady. She is older and has been responsible for a few minor accidents in the last few years. When she got to hospital, they ran some tests, and it showed that her eyesight has really deteriorated, and she probably shouldn't be driving. She is of very small stature, and I have my doubts about how easily she can see over the steering wheel." "Okay, so she could be responsible. But I get the feeling you don't think it was her," Inspector Felix observed. "No, and I am pretty sure one of the young men is responsible," Detective Jones replied. "One of?" Inspector Felix asked. "Are you not sure who the driver was?" "They told us that Josh—" Detective Jones opened the file and checked. Yes, Josh was driving, but when interviewed, their statements were almost word for word, like they had rehearsed it. "Tell me about Josh," Inspector Felix asked. "Josh is a 24-year-old male, with no history of driving offences, and not known to the police. Far as I can tell, despite his friendship with Rowan, he seems like a fairly upstanding citizen," Detective Jones explained to Inspector Felix. "Despite his connection to Rowan?" Inspector Felix asked, raising one eyebrow. "Seems like an odd thing to say." "Not really," Detective Jones said. "Rowan is well known to the police. He has multiple driving offences and has had his licence suspended a few times. He has little respect for the rules and has been caught swerving into oncoming traffic in the past. But according to their statements, Josh was driving, not Rowan. Additionally, when Rowan was brought into the emergency room, they ran a blood alcohol test on him. He came back at higher than the legal amount for driving. I feel like they are lying, and Rowan was driving and he caused this accident. I just need to prove it." Detective Jones sat back and stared out the window. Silence hung between the two comrades for what felt like an eternity. Inspector Felix leaned over and picked up the case folder. "Mind if I have a look?" he asked Detective Jones. Detective Jones shook his head dejectedly. "Am I reading this right?" Inspector Felix asked Detective Jones. "What do you mean?" Detective Jones responded. "According to these medical records, the elderly lady had a bruise on the centre of her forehead, 3 broken ribs, a fracture on the wrist, and a bruise on her right shoulder," Inspector Felix listed off. "Yeah, and so?" Detective Jones asked, unsure of what his friend was getting at. "The report also says that Josh had a bruise to the left-hand side of his face and on his shoulder. Other than that, he was relatively unhurt, whereas Rowan has a bruise on his right shoulder a split to his forehead, a broken right thumb, and a sprained ankle. Ron is clearly the driver, and given his blood alcohol levels and driving history, he is most certainly the one who caused this accident. If nothing else, you have him for providing a false police statement, Inspector Felix pointed out. Oh, you're so right, Detective Jones explained. How did Inspector Felix know that Josh and Ron were lying about who was driving? Pause now to discuss with your class. Inspector Felix knew Ron was driving based on the location of his injuries. His injuries were caused by the driver's side seatbelt, steering wheel, and brake pedal or accelerator pedal. You have been excellent detectives. We'll need your help in the future to help solve cases. Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of future cases. Thanks for watching.